Welcome to our webinar on strategic management. My name is Elisabetta Marafiotti. I'm professor of strategy at the University of Milan Bicocca. And today with me we have Jacques Demotes, Director General of Écran Eric. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I would like to know what is Écran and what is the vision and mission of Écran.
Okay. Écran is a distributed research infrastructure whose objective is to support the management of multinational clinical trials in Europe. And the vision is that all the medical practice should be based on scientific evidence resulting from clinical trials.
Okay, very interesting. And how do you transfer this vision into a strategic plan for Écran?
The strategic plan was defined very early, more than 10 years ago, where we realized that there is a need to support not that much the investigators in clinical trials, but rather the sponsors in clinical trials, and not the big pharma, because the big pharma have internally the resources to manage the clinical trials, or they can outsource to the so-called contract research organization, the CRO. But for the small and medium-sized enterprise, and even more for the academic organization, it is almost impossible to perform the management of multinational trials. So we decided 10 years ago, 12 years ago, in fact, to go for a model where Écran would play a role in supporting the management of multinational clinical trials.
Very interesting. So 12 years ago means that you have already a pretty long history. But what are, from your point of view as director of Écran, the challenges, the strategic challenges that Écran will have to face in the near future?
The challenges are changing over time, but now we have started in 2016 drafting a strategy plan. And in the strategy plan, which is the 3 years strategy plan, we have identified three main challenges. And the challenges are the quality of the services, the quality of the data, the quality of the organization. The second challenge is the challenge related to the attractiveness, meaning being able to attract more projects from more different sponsors, SME sponsors, academic sponsors, and to support also the application for funding. And the third challenge is the expansion of Écran. Now we have 9 countries member and observer of Écran, and we want to expand to more countries in Europe.
Okay, just to understand a little bit how Écran works, could you tell us something about the business model? What are the key players, the key activities, and how they are interconnected in balancing the cost and revenues in this model?
Écran is the coordinating body. The role of Écran is not to perform the services to manage the trial, it is to coordinate the services that are provided by our national partners. We ask each country to be connected to establish a network of clinical trial units who are able to manage the trial in the country. And we have in each country a person called European correspondent, and this network of European correspondents linked to the core team based in Paris are able to coordinate the activities performed by the final service provider in the countries. And through this mechanism, we are able to support the management of multinational clinical trials. But we have to be very careful and not to duplicate what is done by the national partner, because in this case, of course, the national partner would leave the partnership. So the first stakeholder is really this group of national partners. The second stakeholder to us are the investigators, because they are the one coming with a scientific project, with the protocol of the clinical trial, and they ask us to provide support to the management of the trial, but also before the management of the trial, we provide for free support to the funding application, and we perform a scientific peer review of the protocol, and this is part of the preparation. And this is for us a major added value, because this is something the commercial service provider don't provide, because we do that for free. The third stakeholder, which is a very important one, is the sponsor, because as I said, we mostly provide services to the sponsors in clinical trials, meaning the sponsors are in charge of the management of the trial, and this is typically a task for the sponsors. And the sponsor we provide support to are mostly academic sponsors, meaning universities and hospitals acting as sponsor in multinational clinical trials, or SME sponsors. Usually the big pharma don't rely on ECRAN because they have internally the capacity to manage the trial, or they outsource to contract research organization. Another stakeholder which is very important is also the investigation network. There are in some country or in Europe, there are disease-oriented networks. There are networks on rare disease, networks on pediatrics, networks on cardiovascular, and so on. And it is very important for us to establish a partnership with them because they are the one who provide the scientific content. They are also the one who provide the investigation capacity and the access to the patient, and we are the one who provide the generic services to support the management of the trial. And another very important stakeholder for us are the funding bodies, the funding agencies. Most of the trials we support are supported by the Horizon 2020 program of the European Union, or sometimes by different sort of national funding sources. So it is very important for them to be convinced that there is an added value and no extra cost of working with ECRAN. And the last one is the patients, because the role of patients in clinical trials is very important, because not only they will be the end users of the knowledge generated by the clinical trial, but they are also the one who take risk to participate in the trial. And we have to establish a very strong partnership and to involve them in the design of the trial, in the definition of the outcome measure, and to have them as partner of the trial and not as just participant in the trial.
Yeah. In this complex system of stakeholders and with different roles, considering that you are a non-profit organization, how do you get the balance between the costs and revenues?
The balance between the cost and the revenues is based on the fact that we receive public money for some of the activities. And in fact, the public money, the sustainable funding through the fees paid by the members and the observers of ECRAN-ERIC is going mostly to the structuring activity, the capacity building activity, meaning maintaining the core team based in Paris and also maintaining the minimal, let's say, scaffold of competence in the other countries. And then the revenues generated by the clinical trials are mostly redistributed to the national partners, meaning to the clinical trial unit who provide the services to the management of the trial, data management, monitoring, adverse event reporting, submission to ethics committee and competent authority.
Okay. And in this complex system of players, what is, from your point of view, the competitive advantage of ECRAN, and do you believe that this is sustainable considering the evolution that are happening in this industry?
ECRAN is a player in this market, but it is a player in a limited segment of the market, meaning that currently the objective of ECRAN is to support the trials that are sponsored by academic organizations, universities, hospitals, and also by small and medium-sized enterprise, and especially the ones that are funded by public money. Meaning I think the main competitive advantage of ECRAN is that we provide for free support to the funding application. So this is very attractive for the investigators, and this is also very attractive for the SMEs willing to get money from the Innovative Medicine Initiative or from the Horizon 2020 program or any other funding source, because we really support them for free in their funding application. The second added value of ECRAN is that we provide services at non-for-profit cost for the management of the trial, meaning that once the trial is funded, we perform the peer review, which is already a first service to improve the methodological background of the trial, but then we provide services at non-for-profit cost. And when you consider the prices charged by the commercial CROs, this is also a major added value, not only for the investigators, but also for the funders.
Okay, but what is the most relevant achievement that ECRAN reached so far?
We have currently a portfolio of, I would say, a bit more than 40 clinical trials, and I think 6 of them are completed, 5 of them are published. I think one of the trial that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, is a trial that tested the 2 different options for the treatment of septic shock, meaning the colloid starch, or just the ringer, meaning water plus saline. And it turned out that if you consider the long-term outcome, meaning at 6 months, the survival is better in the group treated by the ringer, meaning that we have saved a lot of life by doing this trial, and we probably have saved also a lot of money, because the most efficient treatment in terms of long-term safety is also the cheapest one. So this is really a trial that would never have been run by the pharma company manufacturing the colloid starch. So this is one example. Another example of achievement is rather in the capacity building activity. We consider that quality should also be seen as a service. And for this reason, we have developed a policy of certifying the data centers. We have defined what are the criteria to consider that a data center for clinical trials is GCP compliant and compliant with the FDA regulation and with the European laws and regulation. And then we started a certification campaign. We have now between 10 and 15 clinical trial units with a data center certification. And now this certification program is disseminated to Asia, and we are in the process of certifying centers in Japan, in Korea, in Taiwan, and so on.
Going back to the stakeholder, when we discussed about the business model, you listed a very relevant number of stakeholders. Some of them were national players, others were private companies, and so. Based on your experience, what are the main difficulties that you face in managing the different interests that, of course, these very different stakeholders are bringing into account?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question. We were, so in the past we were supported by the European Union, meaning the ECRAN started in fact in 2004 with the first small funding from the FP6. Then we got a second FP6 funding to develop some tools. Then we were listed on the S3 roadmap. We got the preparatory phase, and then after that we got the fourth project funded also by the FP7, and we have now another project funded by the Horizon 2020. When the money is coming from the Commission, we have to implement the policy of the Commission, meaning integrating as much country as possible. When you become an ERIC, the situation is changing a little bit, because the money, the budget of the ERIC is covered by the contribution of the member states, and you have to consider the interest of the member states, meaning the country who have decided to become member, and not necessarily of the country who are not members. And this raised for us some difficulties, because we have in our portfolio of trial the mean number of countries is 6 to 7 per trial, meaning that the trial we support are really multinational trials. And the point is whether we should restrict the support to the set of countries who are member and observer, or if we want to be more open. So the decision we have is to consider that as soon as 2 member and observer countries are participants in the trial, we open the infrastructure. But it means that we support trial with centers in countries who are neither member nor observer. And this triggers some misunderstanding from some of the ministries of the country who are member and observer. So this is a good illustration of the situation when you move from an European central budget to a budget based on the combination of national budgets.
It seems that national partners are those that are, in a way, creating more critical situations. Do you remember any critical situation that was maybe linked to this interplay of different national and European interests and then was successfully solved within ECRAN?
Critical situation, I would not say it's critical, but we had to make some decision to show that there is an added value for the members to contribute to the budget of ECRA. For instance, if I come back to the data center certification, we started this as an activity funded by the third project funded by the FP7. So it was open to all the European countries that were on board of the consortium at that time. And then we continued this as a project supported by the ECRAN ERIC, meaning by the contribution of member states. And then at that time we have to restrict not only the number of centers certified each year, because this has a cost, of course, for ECRAN, and the budget is limited. So we said we will not certify more than one center per country and per year. But in addition, we had to restrict to the members. And so the observers and the country who are neither member nor observer were not eligible for the data center certification. So this is, for instance, a very good example of this change.
Okay, very interesting. Now, you said that ECRAN was started in 2004 and you were there at that time. What has been your contribution to the growth and the development of this network? And then I would add to this, based on your experience, what are the main skills that you need to have if you want to manage a complex it's not a company, of course, it's a network, but very complex situation like ECRAN?
Good question. I think I'm in a situation similar to the situation of scientists who start a spin-off company and then try to follow the company during the growth period until they are just bought by a venture capitalist. So I hope that there will be no venture capitalist in the next few years. I was at the beginning of ECRAN because in 2000 or 2001 I became the head of a clinical trial unit in France, and I just came back from a trip in the US. I spent 1 year in New York, and I had an opportunity to see the general clinical research centers and the network that was supported by the NIH. And I said, okay, what is great is not just to support the local clinical trials, but I want really to support multinational clinical trials in Europe. I want to create the clinical trial unit of Europe. So this was a bit naive, but this was a strong drive for me to start and to develop this network. So I contacted some colleagues in some countries, and then the project grew progressively, and by the end of 2006 it was listed at one of the priority on the S3 roadmap, and then our life became not easier, but okay, it was the long-term objective was clear.
And in terms of skills, what is relevant in terms of skills for somebody who has to manage this type of network?
I think there are two different aspects, because there are the entrepreneur aspect, meaning creating the concept and then managing. And I think they are probably partly non-compatible with each other. Creating means that you have to have a vision, a long-term objective, and probably to be a little bit naive, because in case I would realize from the beginning the complexity of the enterprise, I would probably never start it. But okay, once you start, because you have this very naive idea, you have to move forward, because also the ecosystem is not appropriate for this sort of entrepreneurship, meaning that there is no reward, no recognition. I'm still professor of cell biology, which has nothing to do with what I'm doing now. So this is interesting. For the management, it is different, because for the management you have to have some skills, and this is something I experienced very early, and it is the reason why. So first of all, I I have now more than 10 years experience in science policy because I have a part-time activity as an advisor of the Ministry of Higher Education and Research, so I know how the ministry behave, I would say in general. And I also had the feeling that I didn't have the real skills to manage an organization, and for this reason in 2008 or 2009 I got an MBA just to make sure that I would have the basic knowledge as a manager. But I think behind that, what is important to be able to manage such an organization that is highly multidisciplinary is to have a multidisciplinary background and in very broad interests, meaning my personal background is clinical neurology. I'm a MD and a neurologist. I spent a lot of time working in basic neuroscience, so it is the reason why I'm still professor in cell biology. Mm-hmm. But I had an interest in many aspects. I went to the mathematics and computer science courses, molecular biology. So I'm not a typical scientist because the main drive of the scientist is to become more and more specialized. And here typically it is an area where you have to be rather open to the science produced by the other and to be able to interface with them.
Okay, so what you're suggesting is that you need a broad spectrum of skills and probably languages, I would say.
This is my personal experience. I'm not sure that this is the case for all the research infrastructures because some require very narrow technical skills, which is not the case for clinical trials. Clinical trials require that first you can interface with investigators, so you can understand what is the basic biology behind, what is the medical case, and also to be able to, to understand the methodology and the biostatistics.
Okay. So concluding this webinar, what are, according to you, the key learnings, key managerial learnings that you derive from your long-lasting experience as director of ECRAN?
I think again there are two different aspects. If you want to create something, you have to have a long-term vision and then be able to adapt your vision to the ecosystem and to develop a strategy for the continuous growth of the organization. Regarding the management is different because regarding the management you have to have basic management skills and you have to have also in the context of this distributed research infrastructure to be able not only to work in a multidisciplinary environment but in a multicultural environment. And one of the main lessons and main profit I gain from this activity is that I have to act, it's between science policy and science diplomacy and intercultural interfacing, and it is very interesting for me to work in this complex environment where I have to understand more and more what is the basic behavior of people in the scientific community in the different countries, also in the ministries, how the ministry works. There are countries where the politicians are stronger than the state, and there are countries where the state is stronger than the politicians. So it's important to know who are the right player and the right stakeholders. And this is very, for me, this diversity of culture is critical because it's a way to better understand each other and to better make Europe a single area for research in general.
Okay. So thank you very much. You provided us a lot of food for thought. Really.
Thank you.
So, thank you.